Welcome to Solutions OP Clinical Trials Podcast. My name is Olga and I'm the Managing Director of Solutions OP. We are a small team of experienced professionals working on clinical trials in the United Kingdom. I'll use our podcast to discuss hot topics in clinical trials and provide analysis of the latest trends and challenges in pharma and medical device industries, not just in the UK but globally. Thank you for listening. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today I have a special guest who is coming from the sunny California and speaking to me on this recording. So he's a professional with remarkable knowledge and experience in drug development. His name is Theuer, and he's a surgeon by profession. His specialty is colorectal cancer. He also had experience working as a researcher for many years before he decided to invest more time in drug development, and he became entrepreneur. So Charles has also written a couple of books, so we're going to cover that a little bit as well with him. I have a lot of questions I can ask Charles, and this is what I said when I contacted him first. But today we are going to talk about oncology, drug development, and the current situation. So the topic is the oncology drug development, what is the current affairs, and what we can expect from the future. And I think that will be a very interesting topic for many people. And I will start with my first question. So we see a decline in the amount of oncology clinical trials lately. So do you think that trend will continue? What are the most exciting treatment areas for investors at the moment, according to your opinion and knowledge?
First of all, thanks, Olga, for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I would say, in general, I think as pharma sees tightening budgets, they think about risk and how to generate the best return on capital investment. And when pharma looks at the relative chance of success across multiple therapeutic areas, they recognize that, unfortunately, oncology development is one of the riskiest of the therapeutic areas. When you look at oncology and you look at advancing a new drug into the clinic through an IND, for example, the chance that drug will actually be approved is about 1 in 20. And that's one of the lowest odds of any therapeutic area. As another example, hematology actually has a much higher chance of success, like 40%. And for instance, autoimmune diseases also have a much higher chance of a new therapeutic in an autoimmune disease becoming approved is much higher than oncology, 3 or 4 times as high. So I think when budgets are tight and people have to really focus on return on investment, they're going to evolve away from oncology. So that's one factor that I think that's driving it. I would also say the other issues are that in drug development, when there's a new mechanism of action that is validated, everyone wants to jump and be part of that story. So I call it the Me Tooism. Everyone wants a piece of the first pie that's created when a new therapeutic mechanism of action is validated. As an example, PD-1s. PD-1s were approved in 2014. Opdivo was approved. Keytruda was soon approved. And then everyone else in pharma had a PD-1 because they wanted a piece of that pie. I'd say right now that there's not a PD-1 out there right now in terms of a mechanism of action that everyone's jumping onto right now that's kind of reset everyone's expectations. And that also, I think, is part of the issue. If there's a new exciting mechanism that's validated and everyone wants a piece of a new pie, then you'll see oncology trials increase, because once the mechanism of action is validated, then the risk goes down incredibly low. People know that they can get approved, and so they'll jump into the game again. So until we see that, I think we may see a continued limited involvement in clinical trials in oncology compared to other therapeutic areas.
That's very interesting, Charles. Thank you so much. It's actually very much probably what you said is what I see, because we've done a little bit of a research on different companies. So we see late stage companies, they tend to all have very much the same indications. while the early stage companies are the ones that have the new stuff and they have some very exciting portfolios, different indications. But once they get to the late stage, the things deteriorate somehow, and they all have the same thing basically, which is in a way it's. I don't find it very optimistic, if I have to be honest, because you don't want everyone to work in the same field. So what is your prophecy for the future in the oncology clinical trials? What are the areas of treatment that you think it's good to invest in? And why do you think they're critical for oncology?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I came from ASCO in June. I mean, it's clear that the mechanism of action that's starting to dominate oncology drug development are the antibody drug conjugates, or ADCs. So that's an exciting new area, and it's being developed in a way to not only address, say, new cancer types, but also to displace current standards of care. As an example, in frontline breast cancer, where the standard of care are antibodies to HER2 and chemotherapy for HER2 positive breast cancer patients. Now there's a trial ongoing comparing the standard of care to using an ADC in HER2 as the primary modality combined with another antibody to establish a new standard of care. So I think we'll see ADCs continue to be a popular class of therapies in oncology, and I think we'll continue to see not just new ADCs, but also ADCs against established targets displace the primary antibodies or naked antibodies that were the initial developed as standard of care in those areas.
Do you think that during COVID we have the RNA was very popular? Do you think there's any future for that in cancer development, or do you think it's more like in more virology and not really in oncology? What's your feeling?
That's a great question. No, so yeah, mRNA packaged in a lipid nanoparticle that, as you point out, was the primary mechanism of COVID vaccination is definitely being applied in oncology. BioNTech, the company that developed one of the primary cancer vaccines and then partnered with Pfizer to fully develop the program, is interested in oncology. And, there's applying some of the same ideas, for instance, that they use to make viral-based vaccines, make RNA-based vaccines for viral disease, to also use the body's inherent machinery to give RNA and then have the body make the antibody or the therapeutic directly from the RNA, as opposed to actually give them an antibody-based therapeutic. So I'd say it's still early, Olga, and we'll see how it goes. I'd say the more advanced therapies I think are right on the horizon are probably more in the antibody, especially ADC category. But lipid nanoparticles are definitely out there. Oncology potentially could be an application, but also other therapeutic areas. People are talking about them quite often as a basis for new therapeutics.
The other thing that I spotted when I was doing the research on late stage companies, it looks like everyone seems to be working in the main oncology indications like colorectal cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer is very popular as well. So where do we go with the rare cancers then? Do you think there will be interest in the companies in the future to invest more in rare cancers, or do you think it's going to be more like the mainstream ones?
No, I think that's a big question. I think it's getting a little more difficult to invest in rare cancers. There's still clear regulatory advantages in terms of orphan drug designation, which, for instance, gives you market exclusivity for 7 years after market authorization. The problem is, I think, so when rare drugs are approved for rare diseases, whether it's cancer or not a cancer, like let's say muscular dystrophy, the price points are so high. I think the question is, can the healthcare system sustain these incredibly high price points? And if they can't sustain these incredibly high price points, then companies will be pressured, and I think we're already seeing that pressure, to focus on larger tumors where, lung cancer, the prevalence is, or incidence is 200,000 cases a year just in the U.S., much higher than that globally. So, if you get a drug approved in lung cancer, even if it's a segment of lung cancer, you've got a lot of patients and you'll have a significant revenue around that. if it's a rarer cancer, the only way to potentially generate a return on investment is have a very high price point. And I think there's a lot more pushback, and there will be even further more pushback from payers around price points. And I think pharma is very sensitive to that. So I do think there's going to be more and more pressure away from doing rarer tumors, with the exception being, if you have an incredibly precise medicine that clearly addresses the tumor, like a drug like Gleevec as an example. So you have a drug like Gleevec that appropriately addressed chronic myelogenous leukemia to the point of turning it into a chronic disease with incredibly high efficacy rates, such that it's effective and patients stay on it for almost potentially their entire lives. Then you can say, well, with the number of patients being small, but the fact that patients are chronically dosed, there's enough revenue there to justify investment. So rare tumors where you have a highly effective therapy that potentially demands lifelong treatment, that's still a focal point. But you really have to be, I think, highly effective in that area for pharma to really think that's going to be worth the return on an investment of the capital needed to approve that drug.
And what do you think about CAR T therapy? I saw that FDA are doing some changes, allowing hospitals which are not certified to use CAR T therapies. Do you think that will probably encourage companies to work more in that field as well?
Yeah, I think cell therapy is really becoming, I think, more mainstream. I think, I was at the ASH meeting last year, the American Society of Hematology meeting. I was really impressed how hematologists are getting much more comfortable with CAR T therapies. I think when they were initially approved, like any new therapy, people were a little trepidation about using it because there was such a maybe a little bit exaggerated focus on the side effects. But CAR T therapy now have been shown in clinical trials to prolong survival. And once you're shown to prolong survival as a therapy compared to other therapies that are more mainstream, people will embrace it. And I've been very impressed that CAR T is now considered more of a mainstream therapy, and it's being used much more commonly, and people are comfortable with it. I would say the same thing is happening in hematology, especially for bispecific antibodies. Bispecific meaning not just bispecifics that target two separate targets to inhibit them concurrently, but bispecific antibodies that actually engage a T cell, for example, to attack a tumor cell. I can see that hematologists are becoming much more comfortable with bispecific antibody therapies in addition to CAR T therapy. So, new therapies that prove benefit and their risk-benefit profile is positive are getting adopted as new therapies by hematologists and other physicians as well.
And what do you think about gene therapy? At the moment there are quite a lot of gene therapies for Duchenne muscular dystrophy and different fields, so not necessarily oncology. Do you think there is any chance for gene therapy to be successful in oncology treatment?
Yeah, so I would say overall gene therapy is in a tough space right now. I mean, I think we've seen the market capitalizations of many gene therapy companies have really suffered. I mean, you mentioned Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Sarepta has an approved drug for that indication, but recently there were some significant toxicities, including patient deaths related to treatment that have really hampered, I think, not just that company, but the entire field of gene therapy. I think the problem is with gene therapy, because it's still kind of a cutting-edge therapy, not a mainstream therapy right now. When one company has bad data, especially bad safety data, it really affects the entire therapeutic class in a very negative way. So I think gene therapy companies that are capitalized, that are doing current trials, will basically be able to deliver those data, and those data will make or break the company. But companies that need capital to initiate that next stage of development, I think are going to have a hard time finding that capital because there's a cloud, and I think the recent Sarepta data is part of that cloud, a cloud over the entire therapeutic area. So it's going to be very difficult for gene therapy, whether it's oncology or non-oncology, to make an impact right now. That's one of the areas I think that's probably suffered the most in say the recent 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I see. And what is your opinion about radiotherapeutics? That's another interesting field. There are quite a lot of companies that are very keen on working. Most of them are big companies. I think because of the logistic, I think it's a bit of a nightmare. But do you think that has a future in oncology, radiotherapeutics?
I think, yeah, radioimmunotherapy, I think it has a great future in oncology. So it's an interesting story. I used to work at IDEC, and IDEC was the company that actually approved the first radioimmunotherapy. It was called Zevalin. It was a radioimmunotherapy to CD20. The main issue with Zevalin is it had to compete with another great CD20-based therapeutic, which was Rituxan, and it didn't quite catch on, and it was never highly successful as a product. But that was literally approved about just over 20 years ago. And I think, like many things in oncology, sometimes there's a seminal approval that maybe the world's not quite ready for, and then it kind of languishes for, say, a decade, and then people realize this actually is an important therapeutic class. And I think that's what's happened with radioimmunotherapy. So I think the future is very bright. It's antibody-based. Yes, there are logistics to actually make the full radioimmunotherapy and chelate the isotope to the antibody, but that's happening now. I think there's exciting data. There's several approved products in prostate cancer and also in endocrine neoplasia. So there are newer products that are coming up that will displace kind of the first products in those spaces, and I think it will continue to grow. So I think I mentioned ADCs are a big focal point in oncology. I think radioimmunotherapy is another area that's right behind it. I'd say ADCs not quite as popular, but will become even more popular with time, because I think people are just getting more comfortable with how to dose it, the logistics of making it, and the effects. The risk benefit is clear with certain targets that radioimmunotherapy clearly helps many patients.
That sounds very, very positive. That's really optimistic. But what do you think about diagnostic, for example? Do you expect any breakthrough in the near future in cancer diagnostics, something that could help? Because I think the biggest issue we have at the moment is majority of the patients are diagnosed too late, where there are very limited options. So do you expect any breakthrough in diagnostic? What's your feeling about it?
No, great question. So I've always been really interested in cancer screening. As an academic researcher at UC Irvine, I did a lot of work in colorectal cancer screening and cost effectiveness. And if anyone listening has not had their colonoscopy and you're 45, please get it, because it could save your life. So always been really interested in cancer screening. And the next horizon is can we screen using a blood test? For instance, use circulating tumor DNA or look at methylation patterns in blood as a basis for determining if there's an early cancer in a patient. And I think that research needs to continue. I would say in general, there's still the issue that those tests are great for detecting a cancer that's already spread. But clearly that's not the goal of the screening test, right? To tell a patient, well, you've got metastatic cancer, doesn't help them very much, right? What really helps them is to tell them you have a stage, 1 or a T1 tumor that can be cured with a simple surgical procedure. And we're not there yet. So, the positive predictive value of these tests that look at, say, methylation patterns or certain circulating tumor DNA assessments in the blood, the positive predictive value and the sensitivity for detecting cancer at an early, highly curable stage, it's not there yet. I think the field will continue to evolve, and I know patients can pay for those tests out of their own pocket. I would just caution patients that pay for screening tests, whether it be circulating tumor DNA or methylation pattern-based blood tests, or even total body MRIs, which are becoming popular. If you want to spend your money on those tests, more power to you, but I would just make really clear, don't do those and forget to do the tests that actually are proven to save your life, that are established cancer screening tests with benefit. So when I think about cancer screening, Olga, I think about the following. If you don't smoke, you take lung cancer from a very high risk to almost off the board. If you get your colonoscopy at age 45, you take your risk of colon cancer also to extremely low. There's also a screening test for prostate cancer. There's some controversy about whether you should do it. My view is do it. I do it as an example. There's a great test for screening for breast cancer. It's not perfect, but self-exam and mammography are very good tests to lower your risk significantly for breast cancer. There's a pap smear for cervical cancer. There's self-examination for melanoma. So if you do the cancer tests that are proven, you will reduce your cancer risk significantly. And if you want to do another esoteric test, like the one I hear the most about is whole body, MRI. Again, if you want to pay, say, $3,000, which is about what it costs to do a whole body MRI, more power to you, but don't do that and not do the tests that do save your life, like the ones I just discussed. The other risk I would just say on whole body MRI is the following. Sometimes they find something that they just can't quantify. And sometimes that means an extended workup to find what ultimately is a totally benign lesion. And sometimes, as a surgeon, I know the workup and the evaluation, which could include a surgical procedure to determine that it's a benign lesion, can itself lead to complications. So whole body MRI is not a free pass. It's expensive. It's not proven to reduce mortality, and it can be problematic. The other test I would point out, though, is if you're a smoker with 20 pack years, chest CT scan is also proven to actually reduce your risk of death. So focus on the tests that actually reduce your risk of death and not on the tests that are the shiny new object that may be of no benefit and actually could be detrimental to your health.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of new shiny ones. I agree on this one. There have been quite a lot of shiny ones. And as a surgeon, do you expect any breakthrough in surgery? Do you think there will be something that could be really, I don't know, changing for surgeons, for oncologists? Have you seen anything or anything that you think would be interesting to have?
Yeah, I think, surgery, I think the big change in surgery the last decade plus, actually the last several decades, is just the increased use of minimally invasive surgery. So that, prostate cancer is a great example. 40 years ago, prostate cancer surgery was done as an open procedure. And it's a hard area to access through an open procedure. And, the risk of nerve damage, for instance, was fairly high. In this day and age, every prostate cancer surgery in most Western countries is done through a laparoscopic high fidelity procedure using an instrument like a Da Vinci that allows the surgeon to really precisely dissect the prostate from the nerves, and the chance of both incontinence and also sexual damage from nerve damage or sexual detriment from nerve damage is much lower. So, surgery's really evolved through minimally invasive techniques, and I think that's kind of the biggest advance, over the past, 20 to 30 years, is that's being applied so much more broadly now across multiple oncology procedures. So that's it. That has improved basically, which is, I think it's very good. Yeah, not just for the patients but for surgeons as well, because sometimes. I listen to some interviews with surgeons. They say, well, the fact that you can actually sit and do something, you don't have to be stand up there for hours. It makes a difference. It's very important. No, it's less taxing on the surgeon too. To your point, surgery it's a physically demanding field. I mean, we used to do, pancreatic surgery required a Whipple procedure. A pancreatic duodenectomy is the official name, and you would literally be standing for about 7 to 8 hours to do that operation. So it's physically taxing on you.
Yeah,
not as much as on the patient, but you definitely.
It's a hard work. Yeah. It's not
easy. Yeah.
And we can finish, Charles, with a little bit about your books. So apart from everything you've done, I have no idea how you managed to write 2 books, from what I discovered. So your first book is The Unnecessary Expense, and the other one is The Medal Count, and I'll just leave you to tell us a little bit more about your books.
Sure, I appreciate it. Yeah, so Unnecessary Expense was really our attempt at my prior company, Tracon, to really try to emphasize and help other companies adopt the practice we use there of insourcing clinical trials. We're big believers that so when you think about drug development, we talked about it's risky. Well, what's the biggest cost for drug development? It's running the clinical trials. And most companies outsource that to a contract research organization or CRO. And the problem with that is we feel that the interests of a CRO are not aligned with the sponsoring biotech or pharma company. And why is that? It's the way the CRO is paid. The pharma company wants the trial done quickly and at low cost. The CRO wants to make as much money as they can by implementing the trial. And the way they get paid is two separate mechanisms. One is what I call fee for service. So fee for service means everything they do, every service they do, they get a fee. That sounds fair, but the problem is if you do more services, you get paid more. So if you make a mistake and have to do two services to correct the mistake, you get paid more. So it kind of encourages a culture of making mistakes and just correcting them and getting paid to do it. That's bad enough in my opinion. The other problem is they get a separate payment, which is the guaranteed monthly project management fee, meaning every month they get paid even if they don't do any services. And so if the trial takes twice as long, they'll get twice as much money through the monthly project management fee. So you can kind of understand why there's no good incentive for doing the trials right the first time and doing them on time and on budget, because if they do it sloppily, correct mistakes, and take forever to execute the trial, they'll actually get more revenue. And that's the whole point of unnecessary expense. If you insource that function and you do trials yourself, which you can do, our view is that you could save literally 70% on every trial you do. And we did that at Tracon. We were running trials in oncology, all in, all expenses, including paying the site at less than $100,000 a patient. We know from talking to other companies, they were paying roughly $300,000 per patient all in. And we know that certain companies in rare diseases, like CAR T companies, which you touched on earlier, Olga, some of those companies, when they actually finally did the full analysis, were paying $1 million a patient. When they took the full budget and divided it by the number of patients treated, that's how much money they were paying. And you can imagine, how can you sustain a company if you're going to pay $1 million a patient? And that's why a lot of these small companies are no longer in business or were unable to finish a trial because the money ran out. So if you insource these clinical trials, you can really help your company by doing trials at lower cost, and because you're running the show, you'll do them on time. You have no incentive to go slow if you actually own the trial. So that was the point of unnecessary expense, and you know, I've been glad certain companies have embraced the book and have adopted the model of insourcing clinical trials, and that's been satisfying to see that.
That's
the other book we wrote,
that's brilliant, Charles. I just wanted to say, because I've read your book, I strongly recommend it for anyone who is interested to understand the model, why it's worth investing in some drugs and why it's not, and everyone who is generally want to understand the industry, because many people say, well, it's a pharma company, they have the money, so it's not a problem. So I think they really should read your book and understand a little bit more on how that works and how you can actually have a drug on the market and still not be that profitable that you think. So it's really a great insight, very well written, and really good book for people to read and learn a lot about the industry and how it works and the perspective of someone who actually has hands-on experience. So yeah, and I'll leave you to talk about your second book. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, first I appreciate the endorsement so much, Olga. Thank you. And Unnecessary Expense was my first book. That's on Amazon, and our second book, it's a little different theme, but it's about really human empowerment. So I was watching the Paris Olympics in 2024, and everyone was talking about China and the U.S. and which country will win the most gold medals, and focused on really those two countries, and they actually tied in gold medals, but the U.S. won more total medals, so people felt like, oh, the U.S., that's a surrogate for being a better country because they win more medals. And then I realized neither of those countries are actually that successful at winning medals compared to their overall population or national wealth. The country that actually does the best is Norway, which is an incredible country. Norway wins 48 times more medals per capita than any country in the world. China actually wins fewer medals per capita than the average country, and the U.S. is slightly better, but only wins twice as many medals per capita compared to the rest of the world. So one country is really empowering their people, and that's Norway. And the book talks about Norway and other countries that really empower their people. And it's really a book about human empowerment viewed through the lens of Olympic national success. And then it talks also about other countries, which unfortunately, a lot of them because they're poor, but other reasons too that don't empower their people. And there are all these great potential athletes that never have the chance to shine as an example, Nigeria. Nigeria is a huge country. It's over 200 million people. It's not quite as big as the U.S., but close. And Nigerian athletes win a lot of medals, but they don't win it for Nigeria. It's the descendants of Nigerian immigrants into Europe mainly that become very successful. But in their host country, they don't win medals because they're not empowered. And so that's the tragedy. So you have Norway, which is a rich country that empowers their people to win medals better than any country in the world. And you've got other countries that, through partly poverty, but also partly governance, don't win a single medal and don't empower the people at all. And then you've got unique individual stories of countries like Jamaica. Jamaica is a poor country, pretty small country, but they win a lot more medals in great disproportion to their national wealth, which tells you something's going on special there. And we talk about those factors as well in the book. So it's really a book that talks about success and failure in the Olympics, the forces that really account for that, and talks about individual anecdotes of how individuals or nations empower their people. So if you're interested in sports, society, and also it has strong statistical analyses that back up the conclusion of the book, I think you'll enjoy Medal Count, which again is also available on Amazon.
That's brilliant, Charles. And it sounds very relevant because it works in the pharma industry as well. There are companies who invest in their people and in their startups and help them, and there are countries where they don't do that, and you can see the results. So I think it's the empowerment is a very important thing, and we can clearly relate it to our field as well, not just to sport. Thank you so much, Charles. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll finish on that statement. I think that's such an important point because certain countries really push pharma, like Australia. Australia has this incredible tax credit program, and U.S. companies are going to Australia in droves to do phase 1 studies for 2 reasons. The regulatory process is simple, it's fast, and they get a tax credit, meaning that if the company's non-profitable, the actual tax credit is paid back, refunded as cash to that company. And they started to dominate in phase 1 trial design. And it's, as you said, it's the government empowering their pharma industry, and now they have really become a dominant force in early and now even more so late-stage trials, but primarily in early-stage trials because the government empowers the pharma industry. Great point.
It's it's something that we can definitely all consider, and hope we see that in other countries too, that they have more initiatives to help companies. So I'd like to thank you for your time today to speak to me. I will put links in the podcast to your books so people will know where to find them. And thank you very much, Charles, for taking the time to speak to me.
Wonderful to talk to you, Olga. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to our listeners.